Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you're going through the motions of an existence that doesn't quite fit, while something deeper inside you whispers that you're meant for something more? That feeling isn't random. It's not your imagination playing tricks on you. Carl Jung, one of the greatest scholars of the human mind, believed that each of us carries within our unconscious a blueprint for who we're truly meant to become. He called this process individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness and authentic self-expression. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss entirely. Some individuals are called to fulfill roles far greater than what their current circumstances suggest. They carry within them an unconscious knowing that they're meant to serve a higher purpose, to heal, to guide, to transform not just their own lives but the lives of others. The question is, are you one of them? Right now, you might be thinking this sounds too good to be true, too grandiose, too presumptuous to even consider about yourself. And that resistance, that's exactly the first sign we need to talk about. You feel like an outsider in your own life. Look around at your daily routine, your relationships, your work. Does any of it feel truly yours? Or do you constantly feel like you're wearing a mask, playing a role that everyone else seems to accept as the real you? This isn't about being dissatisfied with your job or wanting more money. This goes deeper. You feel like you're speaking a language no one else understands. You have thoughts and insights that you've learned to keep to yourself, because when you share them, people look at you strangely. Jung would tell you that this feeling of being an outsider isn't a flaw in your character. It's a sign that your unconscious mind is rejecting a life that's too small for who you're meant to become. Think about the last time you were in a group conversation. Were you fully present, genuinely engaged, or were you observing, analyzing, seeing patterns and connections that no one else seemed to notice? You probably found yourself thinking, am I the only one who sees this? The answer is yes, you are. But this isn't because you're broken or strange. It's because your psyche is oriented towards something different. While others are content to live on the surface of life, you're being pulled toward its depths. While others accept things as they are, you're compelled to see things as they could be. This outsider feeling is your unconscious mind's way of preparing you for a role that requires you to stand apart, to see clearly, to remain uncompromised by the collective unconscious that keeps most people sleepwalking through life. The second sign runs even deeper. You're drawn to others' pain and healing. When someone around you is suffering, you don't just feel sympathy. You feel their pain as if it were your own. You can't walk past someone who's hurting without feeling compelled to help, to heal, to somehow make it better. But here's what's fascinating from Jung's perspective. This isn't just compassion. This is your shadow, the unconscious part of yourself that you've been denying, trying to heal itself through healing others. Jung discovered that we often see in others what we cannot or will not see in ourselves. When you're drawn to someone else's pain, you're actually being drawn to heal the wounded parts of yourself that you've kept hidden in your unconscious. Ask yourself, what kind of pain draws you most powerfully? Emotional neglect, feelings of unworthiness, the pain of being misunderstood, the ache of unfulfilled potential. Whatever it is, that's your wound. And your unconscious mind knows that by healing this wound in others, you begin to heal it in yourself. This is what Jung called the wounded healer archetype. You cannot heal others in ways you haven't first healed yourself, but you also cannot heal yourself without healing others. It's a sacred reciprocity that most people never understand. The people who are meant for higher roles don't just happen to be good at helping others. They're compelled to it. They can't not help. They can't turn away from suffering. They can't pretend they don't see what's broken and needs mending. This compulsion isn't weakness. It's your higher self recognizing its purpose. The third sign will challenge everything you think you know about conformity. You question everything others accept blindly. While everyone else nods along with conventional wisdom, you find yourself asking, but why? While others follow the path that's been laid out for them, you can't stop wondering if there's a better way. This isn't rebelliousness for its own sake. This is your unconscious mind rejecting anything that doesn't align with your authentic truth. Jung understood that most people live their entire lives without ever questioning the beliefs, values, and assumptions they inherited from their family, their culture, their society. They mistake this inherited programming for their own thoughts and feelings, but you can't do that. Something in you won't let you accept things just because that's how it's always been done. You need to understand the why behind everything. You need to test whether these accepted truths actually serve life or merely serve the status quo. This questioning nature makes you unpopular sometimes. People get uncomfortable when you ask the questions they've been avoiding. They prefer the safety of unexamined beliefs to the uncertainty of genuine inquiry. But your higher role requires this questioning mind. You cannot lead others to truth if you haven't first questioned your way out of illusion. You cannot help others break free from limiting beliefs if you haven't first broken free from your own. The shadow side of this questioning nature is that it can leave you feeling isolated and misunderstood. You might even begin to doubt yourself. Maybe I'm just being difficult. Maybe I should just accept things like everyone else does. But that trying to convince you to conform, that's not your authentic self speaking. That's your ego, terrified of standing out, desperate to belong, willing to sacrifice your truth for acceptance. Your unconscious mind knows better. It keeps pushing you to question, to seek, to dig deeper, because it knows that your higher role requires you to see beyond the surface of things. Now, these three signs create a particular kind of psychological tension. You feel like an outsider, you're compelled to heal others' pain, and you can't stop questioning everything. This combination can feel overwhelming, exhausting, even maddening at times. You might find yourself thinking, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just be satisfied with a simple life like everyone else? But Jung would tell you that this tension isn't something to be resolved by becoming more normal. This tension is the creative force that's preparing you for your higher role. Think of it this way: a seed must break apart before it can become a tree. The breaking apart isn't pleasant, but it's necessary. The discomfort you feel isn't evidence that something's wrong with you. It's evidence that something greater is trying to emerge through you. Your unconscious mind is slowly dissolving the false self you've been living as and preparing space for your authentic self to emerge. This process, which Jung called individuation, is never comfortable. It requires you to let go of who you thought you were to become who you're meant to be. But here's the crucial point. You can't force this process, and you can't avoid it. You can only learn to recognize it, understand it, and cooperate with it. The outsider feeling, the compulsion to heal, the inability to accept things blindly, these aren't problems to be solved. They're signs that your psyche is oriented towards something greater than ordinary life. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fit in, trying to be normal, trying to quiet the inside them that whispers of something more. They succeed in silencing that, and they call it maturity. They call it being realistic. They call it growing up. But you haven't been able to silence that. And that's not a failure on your part. That's your unconscious mind protecting your authentic potential from being sacrificed on the altar of social acceptability. The psychological pressure you feel isn't going to go away by ignoring it or trying to become more like everyone else. It's going to go away by learning to understand what it's pointing toward and beginning to align your conscious choices with your unconscious knowing. Jung spent his entire career studying people who felt this tension, this call towards something greater. He discovered that those who learned to honor this call, to integrate their shadow, to individuate into their authentic selves, became sources of healing and wisdom for others. But those who continued to resist this call, who kept trying to fit into roles too small for their souls, developed what Jung called neuroses, psychological symptoms that were really their authentic selves, trying to break through the prison of false identity. The choice isn't whether to feel this tension. The choice is what to do with it. You can continue to see your outsider nature as a problem to be fixed, your compassion as a weakness to be controlled, and your questioning mind as a character flaw to be corrected. You can keep trying to squeeze yourself into a normal life, wondering why it never quite fits, or you can begin to see these qualities as signs that you're meant for something different, something necessary, something that the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it needs it yet. The truth is, the world is full of people playing roles they don't really believe in, following paths they never chose, accepting limitations they've never questioned. The world needs people who can see through the collective illusions, who can heal what's been broken, who can ask the questions that lead to breakthrough. But recognizing these signs is only the beginning. The real journey starts when you begin to understand what's driving these patterns at the deepest psychological level, when you start to see how your unconscious mind has been preparing you for something far greater than you've dared to imagine. What if everything you've experienced, every struggle, every moment of feeling different, every instance of seeing what others couldn't see, what if it's all been preparing you for a role that only you can fulfill? What if your sensitivity isn't a weakness but a superpower? What if your inability to fit in isn't a flaw but a feature? What if your compulsion to heal and question and see deeper isn't a burden but a calling? The signs are there. The question is whether you're ready to see them for what they truly are. The signs don't stop there. In fact, they become more specific, more undeniable. As your unconscious mind continues preparing you for what's coming, you see patterns others miss entirely. Right now, think about the last conversation you had with someone who was struggling. While they were explaining their problem, what were you seeing? Were you just listening to their words, or were you watching the bigger picture unfold, the recurring cycles, the self-sabotage, the way their current crisis connected to patterns that had been running their life for years? You probably found yourself thinking, this isn't really about what they think it's about. You could see the real issue underneath the surface issue. You could see how their relationship problems connected to their childhood wounds. You could see how their career struggles reflected their deeper fears about their own worth. This isn't coincidence. This is what Jung called the gift of psychological sight. Most people can only see what's directly in front of them. They see the immediate problem, the surface conflict, the obvious symptom. They think in linear terms. A caused B, so fix A and B will disappear, but your mind works differently. You see the web of connections. You understand that nothing happens in isolation. You recognize that the same patterns show up in different areas of someone's life because they're being driven by unconscious forces that the person doesn't even know exist. When someone tells you they can't find the right relationship, you see their pattern of choosing emotionally unavailable people because they're unconsciously recreating the dynamic they had with a distant parent. When someone complains about their boss being unfair, you see how they keep attracting authority figures who trigger their unresolved issues with power and control. This pattern recognition isn't just intellectual analysis, it's intuitive knowing. You feel the connections before you can explain them. You sense the underlying dynamics before you can put them into words. Jung understood that this kind of perception comes from having integrated parts of your own shadow. You can see others' unconscious patterns because you've done the painful work of recognizing your own. You can spot self-deception because you've faced your own self-deceptions. You can identify emotional wounds because you've learned to tend your own. But here's what's crucial to understand. This gift of seeing patterns comes with a burden. Once you see these connections, you can't unsee them. Once you recognize the deeper dynamics at play, you can't pretend they don't exist. This leads directly to the fifth sign. You feel responsible for things beyond your control. When you see someone making the same mistake for the 10th time, knowing exactly why they're doing it and exactly how it's going to end, you feel like you should somehow be able to stop it. When you recognize that someone's anger isn't really about the situation they're angry about, you feel compelled to help them see the real source of their pain. You carry a weight that others don't even know exists. You feel responsible, not just for your own healing, but for the healing of everyone around you. You see the suffering that could be prevented, the patterns that could be broken, the growth that could happen if people just understood what you understand. This sense of responsibility can become overwhelming. You might find yourself exhausted by other people's problems. You might feel guilty when you can't fix someone's life, even though you never asked to be their healer. You might wonder why you care so much about things that aren't technically your business. But Jung would tell you that this sense of cosmic responsibility isn't neurosis. It's your higher self recognizing its true nature. You're not meant to live a small, self-centered life because your soul is oriented toward service. Your unconscious mind knows that your well-being is connected to the well-being of others. The shadow side of this responsibility is that you might try to save people who don't want to be saved. You might exhaust yourself trying to heal people who aren't ready to heal. You might mistake enabling for helping or try to do for others what they need to do for themselves. This is where Jung's concept of psychological boundaries becomes crucial. Your role isn't to carry other people's burdens. Your role is to hold space for others to recognize and carry their own burdens with greater awareness and compassion. The sixth sign reveals why you've been given this capacity to see and feel so much. Your struggles have made you incredibly resilient. Look back at your life. Really look at it. How many times have you been knocked down? How many times have you faced circumstances that should have broken you? How many times have you found yourself in situations where you had no choice but to dig deeper than you knew you could dig? Other people look at your history and feel sorry for you. They think you've had bad luck, or they wonder why difficult things seem to happen to you more than to other people. But you know something they don't know. Every single struggle has made you stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Jung called this the process of psychological tempering. Just as metal becomes stronger when it's heated and hammered, your psyche becomes more resilient through facing and integrating difficult experiences. But your resilience isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about transforming hardship into wisdom. It's about taking the poison of painful experience and learning to alchemize it into medicine for yourself and others. Think about the advice you give to people who are going through struggles similar to what you've faced. That advice doesn't come from books or theories. It comes from the wisdom you've earned through your own transformations. You know how to survive things because you've survived things. You know how to find hope in hopeless situations because you've found hope in hopeless situations. This is what Jung meant when he wrote about the wounded healer archetype. Your wounds don't disqualify you from helping others. Your wounds, properly integrated, are exactly what qualify you to help others. You can guide people through territory you've already mapped through your own experience. But here's the crucial difference between you and someone who's just been through hard times. You didn't just survive your struggles. You learned from them. You grew through them. You allowed them to crack you open rather than harden you. Most people respond to pain by building armor. They protect themselves by becoming less sensitive, less trusting, less open. They survive by shutting down. You did the opposite. Pain made you more sensitive, not less. Betrayal made you more compassionate, not more cynical. Loss taught you to value connection more, not to avoid it. This isn't because you're naive or because you haven't learned your lessons. It's because your unconscious mind knew that your higher role would require you to remain open, to stay soft, to keep your heart accessible even after it had been broken. Your resilience isn't the armor-plated kind that keeps everything out. Your resilience is the flexible kind that bends without breaking, that absorbs impact and transforms it into strength. This kind of resilience can only be developed by someone who's meant to hold space for others' pain without being destroyed by it. It can only be cultivated by someone who's destined to remain a healing presence in a world that often feels harsh and unforgiving. Now, when you put these three signs together, seeing patterns others miss, feeling responsible beyond your control, and possessing hard-earned resilience, you begin to understand something profound about your psychological makeup. You're not accidentally sensitive. You're not randomly intuitive. You're not coincidentally strong. These qualities have been carefully developed through your life experience because they're exactly what you'll need for the role you're meant to fulfill. Jung understood that the unconscious mind is far wiser than the conscious mind. While your conscious mind has been wondering why your life has been so complicated, why you feel so much, why you see so much, your unconscious mind has been preparing you for something that requires exactly these capacities. But recognizing these patterns raises an uncomfortable question. If you're meant for this higher role, why does it often feel so burdensome? Why does your sensitivity sometimes feel more like a curse than a gift? Why does your ability to see others' pain sometimes feel overwhelming rather than empowering? The answer lies in understanding what Jung called the tension between the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. Your personal unconscious carries your individual wounds, fears, and traumas, but your collective unconscious connects you to something larger, archetypal patterns, universal themes, the shared struggles of humanity. When you're operating primarily from your personal unconscious, your sensitivity feels overwhelming because you're trying to carry collective pain with individual strength. You're trying to heal universal wounds with personal resources. You're attempting to solve archetypal problems with ego-based solutions. But when you begin to understand that your role operates at the level of the collective unconscious, everything changes. You realize that you're not meant to heal everyone personally. You're meant to embody a healing presence that reminds others of their own capacity to heal. You're not meant to see everyone's patterns so you can fix everyone's problems. You're meant to see patterns so you can reflect back to people what they're ready to see about themselves. You're not meant to be responsible for everyone's transformation. You're meant to be a catalyst that helps others access their own transformative potential. This shift in understanding is what Jung called moving from neurosis to calling. When you try to fulfill your higher role from the level of personal ego, trying to be the one who saves everyone, trying to be the one who has all the answers, trying to be the one who can fix what's broken, you create neurotic patterns that exhaust and overwhelm you. But when you understand that your role is to serve as a conduit for something larger than yourself, the burden transforms into purpose. The overwhelming responsibility becomes sacred service. The painful sensitivity becomes a gift you offer to the world. Think about the people who have most profoundly impacted your own growth and healing. Were they the ones who tried to fix you, or were they the ones who saw your potential and held space for you to discover it yourself? Were they the ones who gave you all the answers, or were they the ones who asked you the right questions? Most likely they were people who had done their own inner work deeply enough that they could be present with your pain without trying to take it away, who could see your patterns without trying to change them, who could witness your struggles without trying to rescue you from them. They were embodying the archetypal role of the wise guide, the wounded healer, the one who has traveled the path and can now hold a light for others walking the same territory. This is the role your unconscious mind has been preparing you for. Not to be everyone's savior, but to be a reminder of everyone's capacity for salvation. Not to heal everyone's wounds, but to demonstrate that wounds can be transformed into wisdom. Not to solve everyone's problems, but to embody the truth that problems can become doorways to deeper understanding. But stepping into this role requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires you to stop trying to be normal. It requires you to stop apologizing for your sensitivity, your insight, your ability to see what others can't see. It requires you to claim the gifts that your struggles have given you instead of seeing them as burdens you have to carry. The world doesn't need another person trying to fit in. The world needs people who are willing to stand out, to speak truth, to hold space for healing, to remain open in a closed-off world. Your unconscious mind knows this. That's why it keeps pushing you toward authenticity, even when authenticity feels risky. That's why it won't let you settle for a life that's smaller than your soul. That's why it keeps showing you signs that you're meant for something greater than what you've been accepting as enough. The question isn't whether these signs are real. The question is whether you're ready to stop seeing them as problems and start seeing them as preparation for the most important work of your life. The preparation phase is ending. The final signs reveal themselves not as burdens you carry, but as powers you're ready to claim. You inspire transformation in others without trying. Pay attention to what happens after people spend time with you, not during the conversation, but in the days and weeks that follow. Do they make changes they've been avoiding for years? Do they finally have conversations they've been putting off? Do they start therapy, leave toxic relationships, or pursue dreams they'd given up on? This isn't because you're giving them advice or telling them what to do. In fact, the most profound transformations happen in people who you've barely spoken to directly about their problems. They transform because something about your presence, your energy, your way of being in the world gives them permission to transform themselves. Jung understood this phenomenon as what he called psychological contagion. When someone has done the deep work of integrating their shadow, of facing their unconscious patterns, of becoming authentic, they radiate a frequency that awakens the same potential in others. You don't inspire transformation by being perfect. You inspire transformation by being real. People sense that you've done the work they're afraid to do. They recognize that you've faced the fears they're avoiding. They feel that you've found a way to be whole that doesn't require pretending to be someone you're not. Think about the last time someone told you, "Talking to you changed my perspective on everything," or "I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like I can be myself around you," or "You make me want to be a better person." These aren't casual compliments. These are people recognizing that your presence activates something dormant within them. Your authenticity gives them permission to be authentic. Your courage to face your shadow gives them courage to face theirs. Your willingness to question everything gives them permission to question their own unexamined beliefs. But here's what's remarkable. You probably don't even realize you're doing this. You're not trying to transform anyone. You're not setting out to be an inspiration. You're simply being who you've become through your own process of psychological integration. This effortless influence is one of the clearest signs that you've moved beyond personal healing into archetypal service. You've become what Jung called an agent of the collective unconscious, someone who helps others access parts of themselves they've forgotten or denied. The eighth sign goes even deeper into the mystery of your true nature. You feel homesick for a place that doesn't exist. There's an ache in you that you can't quite name. It's not depression, though it might sometimes feel like melancholy. It's not loneliness, though it might feel like missing something or someone. It's a longing for a way of being, a quality of connection, a depth of meaning that you've never quite found in the world as it currently exists. You feel homesick for authentic community, for conversations that matter, for a world where people are real with each other. You ache for the kind of love that sees and accepts all parts of a person, for work that serves something greater than profit, for relationships based on growth rather than comfort. This homesickness isn't escapism or fantasy. Jung would tell you that this longing is your soul remembering its true nature, its connection to what he called the archetypal realm, the dimension where all potentials exist, where healing is always possible, where love is the fundamental force, where every person's authentic self is sacred. You're homesick for the world as it could be, not as it is. You're longing for humanity's potential, not its current expression. You're aching for the kinds of connections and communities and ways of living that become possible when people do their inner work and show up authentically. This homesickness is actually a form of prophetic vision. You're feeling the pull of what wants to emerge through humanity. You're sensing the next stage of collective psychological development. You're being called to help birth the very thing you're homesick for, but this longing can also create profound isolation. You might feel like an alien in your own culture, like you were born in the wrong time, like you speak a language no one else understands. You might wonder if you're asking too much of life, expecting too much from relationships, hoping for something that's simply impossible. The truth is, you are asking for something that doesn't yet exist in most people's experience, but that doesn't make it impossible. It makes it your calling to help create it. Every person who has ever helped humanity evolve felt this same homesickness. Every mystic, every healer, every visionary, every person who helped expand what was possible for human beings felt the ache of knowing something better was possible, even when they couldn't see it manifested in the world around them. Your homesickness isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that something's ready to be born through you. This leads to the ninth and final sign. You know there's something you're meant to do. You can't put your finger on exactly what it is. You might not be able to describe it in concrete terms, but there's a knowing inside you, deeper than thought, stronger than doubt, that whispers, you're here for a reason. You have work to do. There's something only you can give to the world. This knowing doesn't come with a job description or a step-by-step plan. It comes as a pull, a magnetic draw towards something that matters more than your personal comfort or security. It comes as a restlessness that can't be satisfied by ordinary success or conventional achievements. You might have tried to silence this knowing. You might have told yourself to be realistic, to stop dreaming, to focus on practical things. You might have convinced yourself that this sense of calling is just ego or fantasy or wishful thinking, but it keeps coming back. No matter how many times you try to dismiss it, no matter how many logical reasons you give yourself to ignore it, that knowing persists. It's patient but persistent. It waits through your periods of doubt, but it never disappears entirely. Jung understood that this inner knowing comes from what he called the self, the deeper, wiser part of your psyche that exists beyond ego, beyond personality, beyond all the roles you play in the world. This self knows why you're here. It knows what you came to contribute. It knows the specific way your unique combination of gifts, wounds, insights and experiences can serve the healing and evolution of consciousness. But here's the challenge. Your ego doesn't know what your self knows. Your conscious mind can't figure out what your unconscious mind has always understood. Your rational thinking can't solve the mystery that can only be lived into. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes not just psychological theory, but lived reality. You can't think your way into your higher purpose. You can't plan your way into your calling. You can only integrate your shadow, heal your wounds, develop your gifts, and trust the process that's been unfolding through your entire life. The work you're meant to do isn't separate from who you've become through everything you've experienced. Your calling isn't something you have to go find outside yourself. Your purpose is the natural expression of who you are when you stop trying to be someone else. Every person you've helped, every pattern you've recognized, every wound you've healed, every question you've asked, every moment you've refused to accept less than truth, all of it has been preparing you for work that only you can do in the way only you can do it. But stepping into this work requires something that terrifies most people. It requires you to stop hiding your light. It requires you to stop apologizing for your sensitivity, your insight, your ability to see what others can't see. It requires you to claim the authority that comes from having done your own inner work deeply and honestly. The world is full of people offering advice they haven't lived, teaching lessons they haven't learned, trying to heal others from wounds they haven't faced in themselves. The world doesn't need more of that kind of help. The world needs people who have done the real work, people who have faced their shadow and integrated it, people who have transformed their wounds into wisdom, people who have learned to see through illusion without becoming cynical, to remain open without becoming naive, to stay sensitive without becoming overwhelmed. The world needs people who can hold space for others' pain without trying to fix it, who can see others' potential without trying to force it, who can offer truth without trying to control how that truth is received. This is the archetypal role of the wounded healer, the wise guide, the authentic human being. And every sign you've recognized in yourself has been preparing you for this role. But here's what Jung understood that changes everything. You don't become qualified for this role by being perfect. You become qualified by being whole. And wholeness doesn't mean having no wounds. Wholeness means integrating all parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability, the wisdom and the questions you still carry. Your struggles don't disqualify you from your higher role. Your struggles have created the very qualities that make you capable of fulfilling that role. Your sensitivity is what allows you to feel others' pain without being destroyed by it. Your questioning nature is what allows you to see through illusions that keep others stuck. Your outsider perspective is what allows you to offer alternative ways of seeing and being. The transformation from seeing these qualities as problems to seeing them as preparation is what Jung called the shift from neurosis to individuation. When you understand that everything about you makes sense in the context of your higher purpose, you stop trying to fix yourself and start learning to express yourself authentically. This shift changes everything. Instead of feeling burdened by your sensitivity, you feel grateful for your ability to sense what others need. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by your compassion, you feel honored to be entrusted with others' pain. Instead of feeling isolated by your insight, you feel called to share what you see in ways that help rather than threaten. But this transformation requires courage. It requires you to stop seeking approval from people who will never understand your path. It requires you to stop trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for someone like you. It requires you to trust your inner knowing, even when you can't prove it to anyone else. The fear isn't really about whether you're capable of fulfilling your higher role. The fear is about what you'll have to give up to fulfill it. You'll have to give up the safety of blending in. You'll have to give up the comfort of keeping your gifts hidden. You'll have to give up the familiar identity of being the one who helps everyone else while neglecting your own calling. You'll have to risk being seen, being judged, being misunderstood by people who aren't ready for what you offer. You'll have to risk failing, making mistakes, learning as you go, instead of waiting until you feel perfectly prepared. But here's what Jung knew that can set you free. The risk of not answering your calling is far greater than the risk of answering it imperfectly. The pain of living a life smaller than your soul is far greater than the discomfort of growing into your authentic size. Your higher role isn't something you have to achieve. It's something you have to allow. It's not something you have to become. It's something you have to stop preventing yourself from being. Right now, in this moment, you already possess everything you need to begin. You have the sensitivity that allows you to feel what others need. You have the insight that allows you to see what others miss. You have the resilience that allows you to hold space for transformation without being destroyed by the process. You have the wounds that have been transformed into wisdom. You have the questions that can crack open others' certainties. You have the authenticity that gives others permission to be real. The only thing standing between you and your higher role is your willingness to claim it, to stop waiting for permission that will never come, to stop seeking qualification from authorities who don't understand your path, to stop requiring guarantees about outcomes that can only be discovered through living. Your calling isn't waiting for you to become someone different. Your calling is waiting for you to accept who you already are and trust that who you are is exactly what the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it needs it yet. The signs have been there all along. The preparation is complete. The only question remaining is, are you ready to stop seeing your gifts as burdens and start seeing them as the tools you've been given to serve something greater than yourself? The world needs healers who have been healed, teachers who have learned through their own struggles, guides who have walked the path they're offering to others, leaders who lead through authenticity rather than authority. The world needs you to stop hiding your light and start letting it shine. Not perfectly, not without fear, not without questions, but authentically, courageously, and with the deep knowing that your presence alone can remind others of their own forgotten potential. This is your invitation to step into the role you've been preparing for your entire life, to trust the process that has been unfolding through every experience, every struggle, every moment of feeling different or called to something more. Your higher role isn't something you have to reach for, it's something you have to reach into. It's not something you have to become, it's something you have to remember you already are. The time for preparation is ending, the time for authentic expression is beginning, and the world is waiting for what only you can give.